despite the US and UK strikes on Houthi facilities in Yemen, the militant group, as we can see, is unrelenting. Today, the Houthis firing an anti-ship ballistic missile striking the US-owned and operated container ship. And earlier, another missile was fired at a US naval vessel, the USS Laboon, and was struck down. There was also another missile that was failed in flight and impacted on land in Yemen. Now, there was no injuries or damage reported in any of these attacks. But this is part of what the Houthis are calling a, quote, strong and effective response to the US-led strikes. The UK Foreign Minister speaking on this today, calling the Houthi strikes thuggery.
Well, we've always been clear. Our intention is not to go into Yemen or anything like that, but simply to send a very clear, I hope unambiguous message to the Iranian-backed Houthis that their behavior in the Red Sea was completely unacceptable. It was nothing to do with anything about almost like thuggery, really, because they were targeting, I think, over 50 nations had their shipping impacted by it. And so this was to send a very clear message. It did also degrade their ability.
Now, meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people, some carrying Kalashnikov rifles, are taking to the streets in Yemen's rebel-held capital, Sana'a. Large-scale demonstrations have been a regular occurrence since the Israel-Hamas war flared in October. But since the retaliatory strikes on Yemen, the protest turnout is just continuing to increase. Emma, Sean?
All right, Sarah Williamson, thank you very much for that update. And we are following that continued breaking news out of Israel, where a deadly terror attack has taken place. We're learning at least one person is dead, more than a dozen Israelis injured in a stabbing attack just north of Tel Aviv. This according to Israeli police. Terrorists are said to have been arrested.
And Jerusalem correspondent Daniel Cohen is tracking this. He's live in Israel with the very latest. Daniel.
Hi, guys. Yeah, kind of a lot to follow with this story. So let me first just say this. Heavy hearts here in Israel, in the Jewish community around the world tonight. A 79-year-old woman, an Israeli, is dead. At least 17 others injured after a wild. There was a terror, stabbing, ramming attack in the normally quiet Tel Aviv suburb of Raanana. And what you're looking at right here, this is where I believe it started. This woman who was driving this vehicle stabbed, carjacked. And but just wanted to show you just a bit of the devastation here. According to police, as we look at some of the video also, one of the terrorists here, there were two, changed vehicles 3 times during the course of the rampage. Like I said, there was a stabbing, carjacking, running victims over, and then that we saw it happen again and again. 2 men responsible have been identified by the Shin Bet as relatives from Hebron. That is an area of Judea and Samaria under Palestinian control, a man in his 40s and another in his 20s. Not quite sure the relationship yet, but police said that the 2 suspects worked at a car wash here in Raanana in the area and that they had entered Israel illegally. That attack coming as Israel's announced 9,000 terrorists have been killed in Gaza since the start of this war. Now, what's the connection, you may be saying? Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu answering and has been answering for days to charges of genocide, what Israel's been accused of in Gaza at the ICJ, suggesting the Israeli military could even take full control of the Philadelphia corridor. What is that? It runs along the border of Egypt. It's 14 kilometers, and that is how weapons are smuggled into Gaza. Listen to the Prime Minister.
Clearly, it must be closed. There are a number of options as to how to close it. We're checking them. But we have yet to make a decision, except for one thing. It has to be closed. No one will stop us. Not The Hague, not the axis of evil, no one.
A missile fired from Lebanon hitting a home in northern Israel on Sunday. It killed 2 civilians, and that is renewing this bubbling concern here about the risk of a second front erupting in the war. I should also tell you, several Hamas commanders are reportedly fleeing Lebanon for places like Turkey and Syria after Israeli strikes last week took out half a dozen terror leaders. Okay, so let's wrap it up with more on the terror attack here today. 4 of the victims, we understand, Sean and Emma, were children. Emergency personnel whisked them away to a local children's hospital. There were teenagers also injured. We'll be monitoring the status of them very closely.